Hey everyone, and welcome to the Long On Retro Gaming Podcast. We hope you're having a wonderful 2024. We had an amazing 2023, and we wanted to kind of kick off the new year with discussing a bunch of stuff, but the theme for this year has kind of been what makes Long On Retro Gaming so amazing, and what makes our expo different and unique and original. So I was contacted by one of our management team who had an amazing idea to talk about something that I think is very important to us as classic gaming fans and retro gaming fans, as well as us as an expo. So, welcome back to the show, everyone listening. George Smith, who is one of our free play coordinators, racing game guru and genius, and all around great guy. George, welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be back, Mike. I know it's been a while since we last talked, but happy to be back to talk about the expo and talk about gaming in general.
Yeah. So it's always a pleasure to see you in person or via one of these podcast recordings. So George, you came to me with an awesome idea, and we've done a lot over the last year or so with the podcast where we talked about different sections, what you can expect to see at the expo. But this is really kind of what you brought to us today is really kind of the lifeblood of what we do, the reason why we kind of exist in some way, shape, or form. I've always said that there is an aspect to what Long On Retro Gaming does and what the Expo does that is, in its core, educational. And I feel like what you do is important for that, as well as what you've brought to the table today. So, George, give us a little rundown. What do you want to talk about today?
So, what I wanted to actually talk about today, there's a lot of ways that gaming, as we focus on the actual preservation of, hey, playing it on original hardware, playing it as it should be intended. But there is a thriving community that's out there in various different ways, which we'll discuss, of ways that they enhance the game or make the game live on, as per se, for future generations. So there's a lot of different ways that actually go about that. We're going to be talking about like English translations. We're going to be talking about certain mods that are out there, certain game improvements, and just how this is required to be run on real hardware. So, because a lot of these things that get done, and we'll actually talk about it first with the English translations. There's games that, to the West, we've never played before, but now we're actually be able to experience it because of the hard work and dedicated community which is out there.
Yeah.
So,
and I think by seeing that stuff too, I think even the big video game companies have kind of wisened up a little bit into saying, oh, wow, this actually would be successful outside of Japan, say, right? If we're talking about a translation. I think one of the eye-opening moments for me is when I had gone to MagFest a few years back, and MagFest obviously is an amazing time. We had an amazing time. Brendan and I were doing museum research and doing all that stuff, and music and gaming is a great time. I mean, I still think Long On Retro Gaming is the best expo on the planet, but I definitely had a good time at that. I believe it was 2020, and there was a really interesting panel with Harumi Fujita, who did part of the music for Mega Man 3. And it was eye-opening to me because, and this is part of, I think, what you're talking about, she said in her panel discussion, she goes, we wrote all this music and for this game, and we didn't realize that it had a life outside of Japan. Like, she was like, the first time I came to the United States to do one of these and I saw a room filled with Mega Man fans or Rockman fans, she was like, this is crazy. Like, I didn't realize that people knew my music. I didn't realize that this game and this series and this character was this popular outside the United States. So I think it's amazing that, these kind of fan translations, and I guess that's probably the first step here. These fan translations, have kind of breathed life into some of these games that otherwise weren't released here. And I think some companies see it and they go, "Oh wow, maybe there is life for this. Maybe this game has legs." Most recently, obviously, Live Alive was finally translated into English and released in this like HD 2D version by Square and sold a couple million copies. And we would never. The only way to play that previously was to play some kind of fan translated ROM. So yeah, George, break it down for us, like the English translations and stuff and how that's progressed.
Yeah, so there's been a lot, and there's a couple games I just want to mention.
Yeah.
But really, the process of English translation, like it's the reason why it's important and why it's done is simply you can do it on your phone of like Google Translate. So you
Yeah.
get to like a scene of a video game, and you kind of can go up on the screen and scan it and be like, all right, this is what it means and translate it. But you
Yeah.
kind of lose yourself from that immersive experience. So what these dedicated like fan translations actually come up with is that they go into the game, they do the actual translation itself, but they do have to go in by code, rather be like hex editing and even like just making sure within limits of like different, verbiage and stuff, to be able to make the translations actually flow, make it work, and make it more
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
So certain examples of games, one of the big ones that gets talked about a lot is Mother 3.
Yes. That's
Um,
kind of like right now, it's kind of the white whale, right?
Yeah, because it's been so much of a push from the fans to bring it over to the West and actually have Nintendo do that. And I think that'd be like a great gift for the fans to actually finally have that happen.
I
So
agree. I agree.
yeah, so that's like one example. Other examples that are out there, much I mentioned like Ace Combat 3.
Hmm.
So we did get it in the Western release, but what is with Ace Combat 3, we got a different version than what was released in Japan.
Okay.
Uh, because Ace Combat 3, when it was released in Japan, didn't sell up to expectations, didn't sell as well. So they got rid of more like the Western release that we have is more linear,
Hmm.
but the Japanese release has more branching paths and also has anime cutscenes. So there's more of like story elements that were missing from the Western release. So that's what's actually brought and preserved, as one example.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really interesting with Ace Combat 3. And I always thought the Ace Combat games were actually pretty popular in the States. I feel
Mhm.
like they released a bunch of those over here. Obviously, Mother 3 has always kind of been the game that people search. Actually, I have a cart right here from Mother 3. I had it right on my desk as you
Yeah.
said it, so I think that's funny. I do think Nintendo is with Mother 3. I think there's some issues with that game in terms of like theme,
Yep.
that I think might be a little difficult. Like I've played Mother 3 and I remember like being so excited to sit down and play it for the first time. And when I played it, I'm like, the opening scene, it's like, spoilers, folks. The opening scene, the two kids lose their mom and their dad kind of goes on like this rampage and like beats up everyone in his town. And like, I think it's great. I think it's a great character moment. I'm just not sure if Nintendo's like, is this our image? But I really do hope that the fans get that gift. I think some sort of remake or something like that. But none of that would happen if it weren't
Mhm.
for these folks who went in and did these translations. And for folks like you said, yeah, the Google thing is really cool. The Google thing, like the way we can easily translate stuff, from Japanese to English or whatever language, really, in this day and age, just with something in our phone is really like incredible. But at the same time, the sentence structure and the way things are translated when they're translated literally is very, very weird.
Mhm.
And as we sit there and we look at it, we're like, you read it and you're like, okay, I have to translate what the translation did to make it make sense in English to me in my English speaking brain. So what these localizers do is really just incredible work, whether it's for profit or not. And I think the
Mhm.
Mother 3 fan translations are incredible. But are there any others that you want to bring up?
Yeah, and like another thing to your point, Mike, before I go into like a couple other
Yeah,
games,
yeah, yeah,
there's also colloquialisms that may be Japanese specific, just like what we have in the West, of
yeah.
like certain terminologies and certain sayings that, as you're right, it's not easily translatable. So it's definitely like great when the community actually does this and to make it like more sense so it matches what we have. And it's not just English, but there's also Portuguese, Spanish, French,
Yeah.
all sorts of different languages that are out there. So it's really making it more accessible globally.
Yeah, in this day and age too, it's like video gaming and gamers are everywhere. They're not just focused. For years, our focus was kind of drawn to like, okay, Japan, the United States, and the UK/Europe. Everything else was kind of like, oh, are they gaming in these other places? And then you realize that it's a very ethnocentric kind of isolationist way to think about it, which whatever, which is not great. But you know the amount of work that goes into this, and I think they're really doing something special. And like we said, it's not just about access to the games and being able to play them, but it's the preservation of what I would consider to be artwork or very
Right.
important. It's literature, it's artwork, it's no different than a film or a book or something like that.
So yeah, to your point, like there's a couple other games I wanted to mention.
Hmm.
First off was Clock Tower, which is for the Super Nintendo,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's actually more prevalent now because Clock Tower is being remastered by Limited Run Games, I believe, coming
okay.
up soon.
So
Um,
Clock Tower for the Super Nintendo is being
Clock
remastered.
Tower, yeah. So
See, but that's it though, right? That's the push. Would LRG have gotten into that if there wasn't a really robust and dedicated fan community?
exactly, like it just they something is actually there,
Hmm.
and it's actually grown in popularity over the years. So now LRG actually recognize this, and there's other series that are throughout the years that have been like this at LRG's, like Shantae, not
Yeah.
related to this topic, but there's been like a growing fan base for it. So they really embraced it.
And I love what Limited Run does because it's like it's not just giving you, the file for like it's not just giving you the obviously they're forever physical, that's their thing, but it's not just like, hey, this is it for PlayStation 5, this is it for PlayStation 4, this is it for Switch. Like they will work with companies and actually put together like, no, this is a legit Super Nintendo cartridge that you can play. And I imagine that's because of the kind of the progress we've had with 3D printing, where you can kind of
Mhm.
make things to spec. But I need to look into that because I didn't know about the clock tower thing. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's something that's definitely very recent. But it's similar to, like, as you mentioned with Live Alive, of just because there's has been like a wanting for
Yeah,
like games
yeah,
like this.
yeah.
Other games I just want to mention. Recently for the Dreamcast, there was Blue Submarine #6 that got fully translated, which is based on the anime manga.
Hmm.
The and for me, it's personal because that's one of my favorite like Toonami like anime movies that came out.
Yeah.
So to see that was awesome. And then also a couple other games. Police Knots actually does have an English translation,
Yep.
which is another game, and then Racing Lagoon as well. So, and this is just like a short list, but there's so many others. And the more that you kind of dig deeper into the English translations, like another example too is there was a point and click game that was made in the '90s for Beavis and Butthead. It was called
Oh,
Virtual Stupidity, and it was actually released on the PlayStation in Japan, but it never got an English release here. So there's people who took the audio files from the PC version and the English files, like the voice files, they put into the PlayStation version, and now you have an English translated Beavis and Butthead game for the PlayStation One.
I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
might need to look into that. That sounds amazing. But
Mhm.
another game that I want to bring up is Trials of Mana, which was
Yes.
Seiken Densetsu 3 over in Japan. Never came to the United States, probably because it was too late in the Super Nintendo's life. It was probably going to be a Nintendo PlayStation game, but it ended up getting moved and whatever. So when that game finally got a translation and a remake, I got both, right? It got both. There's a Mana collection and it's on there and in its
Mhm.
original form, and then they remade it. So you wouldn't have that without the fan community. You wouldn't have that without these folks doing these translations. I've wanted to play Police Knots for a very long time. I
Mhm.
don't have a Saturn mouse.
Yeah.
So like I tried to play it on the controller and it's very difficult, but that's something I definitely want to play at some point. I would love for them to remaster that. I know Konami's got this kind of weird relationship with Kojima, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It's
I
actually
know.
a game on this list that you put that you didn't mention that I'm very
Hmm.
interested in, and that is
Hmm.
Densha de Go. Densha de Go. So that's a Japanese subway simulator,
Yeah.
which I mean that looks amazing.
Yeah, I didn't mention it because this was something of like a research. I was like, really? But I still wanted to mention on here. Like, these are more of like the obscure titles that
Yeah,
kind of get brought up.
yeah,
Another title that I have on here is it's called Kirin Rin Squash. Sorry if it's
yeah,
actually like the translation, but that's
yeah,
another fun puzzle
yeah.
game.
Kururin Squash. Yeah,
Squash. Yeah. So these kind of things, it's you wouldn't. There's translations when you go further, and you're just like, I wouldn't really know what to expect. I think certain translations are for like Chinese checkers games
yeah.
that it's Chinese checkers for PlayStation One, but there's an English translation patch for it, and then a lot of like the Winning Eleven games have also English translation patches for it. Um, so there are games that are for everybody, and I think it really, as mentioned before, just opens up the possibilities and opens up the replayability of these older consoles, because it's like, hey, I thought I had the whole North American collection or collected for it, But then wait a minute, let's take a look at the Japanese stuff, which is what I
Yeah.
also want to mention too. There are a couple of like, just as examples, there's some English friendly games that may have
Yeah.
never gotten released in the West, but they're actually still playable um, if you are able to actually get a copy of it. So there's a couple games that I have on this list as well.
Yeah. And you know what? I feel like those are only limited because, like, a lot of time, well, I mean, if you get, I know you like racing games and a lot of them get very technical. So that's probably hard to play if you don't have a translation. But shooters, platformers, belt scroller beat 'em ups, fighting
Mm-hmm.
games,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess knowing what the characters are saying is important if you can, but like those really don't inhibit. That doesn't really inhibit your ability to play or enjoy the game because so many of us will plop in a Japanese fighting game and like, yeah, they're not speaking English, but who cares? You
Right.
know, I think in that instance, and I'm glad that the video game industry has moved away from this. I feel like in that instances or in those instances, we're only held back by the fact that companies for some reason 20, 30 years ago were really into region locking.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways around that now. And you have these English translations for English friendly games that yeah, so let's talk about those a little bit. Like what do you got? What do you got some standouts there?
Yeah, so a couple of standouts just to mention is first off going to go with Devil World. Devil
Okay.
World is for the original Nintendo, and
Yeah.
this was a game that was recently released on the actual Switch Online subscription
Yeah.
service, and it is like it is a Pac-Man clone, so it has that very similar aesthetic. Except the mechanic in this is that your villain is the devil, and the devil's actually on the top, and he's moving the screen up, down, left, right, side to side. So not only are you trying to like beat the level, but you're also trying to make sure you don't get killed or lose a life because the devil's moving the screen so much.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why that was not released here is because of the devil and a lot of like the imagery that was done that
Hmm.
was used.
Yeah.
So, but that finally got released on Switch Online. So glad that people are starting to enjoy that game too.
Yeah, that's important, right? These are really fun games, and in this kind of era of like extreme access, it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, we should be able to play everything. All right. Also, like, hey, it wouldn't hurt people to learn a little Japanese. You
A
could get
little bit.
Duolingo. Come on.
Exactly. Uh, a couple other games want to mention for the Dreamcast. There actually was a compilation called Yu Suzuki GameWorks Volume One. There's no Volume Two, but there's a Volume One,
That's good.
and it had Outrun, Power Drift, Space Harrier, Hang On, and Afterburner too. So those games, like the menus, do have Japanese characters, but you can get through the menus and be able to play full arcade games with no problem.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the Dreamcast was so good at
Yes.
arcade games. Like that was really the kind of culmination of everything Sega was ever trying to do. Actually, just got my Dreamcast. Want to give a shout out to George Portugal. Just got my Dreamcast HDMI modded, and it is wonderful.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
But yeah, no, man, I want to check that out. I probably have that on for Dreamcast somewhere, so I got to check that out. Yu Suzuki GameWorks because those old Sega arcade games are the best. You got
One
any
of
others here?
Yeah, one other game that I wanted to mention. It's called Gamera 2000,
Mhm.
and Gamera 2000. It's the kaiju like Godzilla kind of like
Yeah,
type of game, but it is an on rail shooter. So you have Gamera, which is the kaiju character, and then you also have yourself, and you're shooting at the same time and trying to beat villains. So all right, so it's very like Japanese specific because of like the content, but all the FMV scenes that are in there are actually English.
oh
The
wow.
So you can actually play it through and listen to it. The subtitles are in Japanese, but the actual FMV is fully English. So there are
That
certain examples that have
that's odd. That's odd. I feel like in Japan they also do that with like Resident Evil.
that.
Like I
Hmm.
feel like the Resident Evil games might be in English first because they're American characters for the most part. But that's a really strange pick. And is there a reason why it never came to the States? It's because people aren't that familiar with Gamera.
That's more than likely.
Yeah.
People are more familiar with Godzilla
Yeah,
just
of
because of
course.
like the franchise, but Gamera, not saying that it's obscure or anything, but at the time around the 2000s, it was not as well known in like the West. So I think
Yeah.
that does happen a lot.
Hmm.
Especially with like the anime, like manga based
Yeah.
games.
I feel like nowadays it's like even stuff that is obscure has a giant fan base, right? I feel like
Hmm.
the internet has made us so aware of everything. Anime obviously is growing in terms of popularity year over year. It's becoming the most prolific and most popular entertainment medium for a lot of people. So I feel like we might see more of these kind of come out of the woodwork. And I think it's really important for fans translations to kind of, if not be the only way that we can play the game, but actually kind of, wake the IP owners up into saying, hey, you should play these, and you should translate these, and people will buy them. you know, and being held back by region locking is just stupid. I'm so happy that the modern consoles just did away with that. But there were ways around it, right? Like the Saturn, right? You could buy an action replay, and
Hmm.
that would allow you to play Japanese disc games. And that's probably the best way to play X-Men versus Street Fighter, or Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, which I think only came out in Japan for the Saturn. I don't know if that was an American release, but I don't know off the top of my head. But Gamera 2000, I gotta check that out.
It's kind of interesting, like all these
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
titles that you find. So
yeah. How do you find all these? You were just researching, or are these things you've known about for a while?
there's other like YouTubers that I watch, and like
Okay.
also researcher as well. And then there's like certain things that are pretty cool that I see.
Yeah,
So I think back to the expo, kind of to bring it back a little bit.
yeah.
Um, Again, we try and bring stuff which is unique. We try and bring stuff that people have never seen before, and just brand new experiences. So this is why, like, if you look at like other YouTube channels, or you look at like romhacking.net has a lot of English translations,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
just other sites, then you're just like, all right, let's see where we can go from this, and let's see how we can plug it in. And then, like last year, I had Initial D, special
Yeah.
stage for the PlayStation 2, and that I found that looking through YouTube, and I was like, oh, this is it's not even really published anywhere, but it was
Hmm.
at least it didn't tell you the story, so like you can't understand the story if you're not Japanese speaking, but at least you can get through the menus and play the game, and that
Yeah.
was the most important part for me. So a lot of people loved it. A lot of people love Initial D, and it was very, very popular. So
I think that's awesome. Yeah, Initial D is a huge show, and those games are a lot of fun.
mhm.
Now, there's an arcade for that too, right? Is that the arcade game, or is that the separate game?
So Initial D Special Stage, that was the PS2 release, and they did
Yes.
have other home console releases, but it is based on the arcade game,
Okay. Very,
um,
very cool.
which many
Now,
variations of it, by the way, of Initial
yeah,
D.
I could only imagine. Now, do you plan on maybe bringing more stuff like this to the expo for 2024? I know that John Aguilera he's our import coordinator,
Hmm.
and he does an excellent job with a lot of that stuff, especially when it comes to like Famicom and Famicom Disk System and stuff like that. Like some of that stuff he's got is so cool, especially being able to play like Super Mario Brothers 2 right next to like Doki Doki Panic. Like that's really really cool
Hmm.
stuff. But are you guys gonna like put your heads together and maybe make a mini section for some of this stuff?
Yeah, so we are definitely always considering of it. If it's maybe not a mini section, then maybe splattered out all throughout the
Yeah,
different sections.
yeah.
So all I could say is stay tuned.
Oh man, you can't even give us a tease? Not
Can't even
even a
give you a
little tease?
tease.
Oh
Not
no.
this time
All
around.
right. Well, I'm gonna bust both your chops as much as I can to see what information I can get out of you for my own benefit, not for the benefit of the show. We could talk about that as we get closer,
Hmm.
because as you tell me stuff that you might be getting or might be interested in putting out there, I would love to do another episode to sit down and talk to you about that stuff, because I think once again, this is what makes us different, right? This is what makes this show original. It's that we have all this stuff, we have access to all this kind of different things that you might not see at every expo. And you know what? That's for like the hardcore niche fans, right? I always say this. I love that you can go into the Long On Retro Gaming Expo and you can sit down and you can play Super Mario Brothers 3. You can sit down, you can play Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Or you can go play an X68000. You can play Initial D on PS2. You can maybe play Gamera 2000 if you want to get really wild.
Hmm.
But But yeah, the stuff you do is really cool. So I love the English friendly games. You know, I know recently I think they translated Elevator Action Returns
Hmm.
recently, or they re-released it recently. But like I remember playing that, you know, on an import Saturn a disc, which was so cool. And it's such a good time. I see you have Res here as well. Res is a really just a really great game.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, really, really good stuff. And you know, folks out there, you know, invest in this. Do some research, find some, you know, English translations of English friendly games or non-translations of English friendly games that you might like. What I'm actually very interested in next is you have this list for mods for console games, and you got some stuff on there that. How does this work?
So this is what I wanted to kind of preface here. There's a lot of mods that you could play on your PC through emulators and other
Yeah,
means, right?
yeah,
But this list that I have focused is games that I've actually seen that there are, you know, as you said, like your Mother 3 cart that you
yeah,
can actually physically play on consoles.
yeah,
So a couple of things that I have on this list is, you know, Smash Remix, uh,
yeah,
which is a big one. There are carts that are out there where you can play on actual hardware. And for those who don't know, it's Smash Brothers 64, except they've added you know, tweaks and improvements to the gameplay, added more stages, added more characters, you know, such as you could play like actually as Conker from Conker's Bad Fur Day, and a whole bunch of other different things. And it makes it like its own unique game.
yeah,
And that's so I've seen that. A lot of like NBA Jam, NHL 94, and Tecmo Super Bowl. They've had seasonal updates throughout the years, or even like NCAA football, which is the collegiate
yeah, yeah,
version.
yeah.
And even like international hockey leagues have been made into different seasonal updates or graphical mods.
So what you're saying is I can go and play an NES or Super NES football game that's been updated, and the Jets are still bad.
No comment, but yes, yes.
All right. Well, that's really cool. So do they update the rosters and they update like stuff like that? Sports games and you know PS2 era sports games are really really good. You know,
Mhm.
like NFL 2K and obviously you know the older Madden games. So they're all really really good. So DJ Hero, is that how does that work?
So I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit, but I'm going to
Okay.
mention it as well. No, it's all good. It kind of goes into like how it works. So with DJ Hero 2, you can add custom charts. And this is something similar to what Clone Hero you can do.
Okay.
For those who don't know what Clone Hero is, that's a freeware you know, game where people have been adding their own custom Guitar Hero tracks, but
That's
they're
cool.
in
Yeah.
Clone Hero. So DJ Hero 2 works in a similar way, where you can have rather a Wii, a you know a custom, you know, like a soft modded Wii,
Which is pretty easy to do.
pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
Custom firmware PS3, which as long as you follow steps, that's, you know, relatively simple to do. Um, and then also any hacked Xbox 360, and you can also play it on the PC as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a dedicated community that's been adding custom DJ Hero mixes of mashups, full with scratches, full with crossfades,
Oh,
full
that's
just
cool.
like you're playing with DJ, you know, like an actual DJ,
Yeah.
and you add it into the game, and it becomes part of the set list.
Oh, that's really
Um,
cool. That's really
yeah,
really cool. That's special. That's really special, and it keeps these music games alive. And DJ Hero's cool. It's a cool thing. You know, I feel like there's I feel like these music games are set for a comeback. Like I
yeah.
feel like it's been 20 years. I
Hmm.
think it's time that we see them make a comeback. So now when you're doing this now, you're modding the hardware and you're modding the software.
So with the PS3, with DJ Hero 2 specifically, it's custom firmware.
Okay.
So it's actually this. It's more software than more of the hardware than anything,
Okay.
because you're
I
able
get it.
to get around it. It's similar. It's similar to like how you soft mod. Like you're not actually doing anything physical. You're
Yeah.
doing more of like a bypass from like the factory settings.
Yes, or like if you have a Wii that's soft modded, it's usually just it's done all on an SD card. That's the Wii flash card that's in the thing. So you're not like really modding the actual hardware. So it's probably a little safer, even though I don't know. It could probably brick a Wii if you really screwed up. So I don't know.
Yeah. Same
But
thing with
there's
PS3. You know,
there's
it's
a
just
hundred
careful.
yeah there's 100 million Wii's out there. So if you brick your Wii, you could probably get another one. Um, No, that's really really cool, and it keeps the community alive, right? It keeps the community, going, and it's important. Like NBA Jam with modern rosters is probably a blast. You know?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And then like even to like there is a mod that's out there for the NBA Jam that was released, on the PlayStation Network and the
Oh, like the 2011 one
yeah,
or
there is
2010?
there's I know that there's actually what's called like a Legends mod where
Okay.
there's this one person who went through all different like teams throughout history, championship teams, famous teams, added players, so it actually expanded. I forget the exact amount of teams that were added,
Oh
but
wow.
I think there's at least like 60 plus NBA Jam teams that you can use from
That's
all different
incredible.
eras.
That's
So,
incredible. See, but that's part of the fun, right? That's part of the fun of playing this stuff. And people do, I mean, the mods that people do in general. You see it mostly on PC gaming
mhm.
these days. But like, yeah, I've seen mods for current games that the amount of work and effort that goes into it is really really special. I see that you have one section here. It's called game improvements. So what are we talking about there?
Yeah, so a couple of improvements I wanted to mention. The first one is actually what was called MSU1
Okay.
patches. And we discussed this previously, but there was a person, a developer named Bayou, who developed this, and it adds soundtrack quality music to actual games. So, for example, I have Indiana Jones, for the Super Nintendo,
Yeah.
and you can add the actual soundtrack from Indiana Jones into it, so it adds to that immersive
Oh,
experience.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really 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 cool. And these are just patches that improve the overall game.
For the audio part,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some patches where you can combine it with other like tech improvements
Yeah.
that have been made by the community, maybe gameplay fixes, tweaks, but the MSU patch really, for most of them, are designed for like the vanilla games,
I get it.
or just
I
like
get it.
the standard games.
Okay. No, no, that's really cool. And being able to work with like better audio is, I think, always preferable.
Mhm.
I like the way a lot of old games sound, but like, that kind of robustness to it is really cool. Have you and this is a physical mod. Have you ever done the FM, not the FM synth, it's the sound channel mod on an NES?
I've never done that. No.
Okay, so it adds the extra. It actually, because the NES has all the sound channels that I guess the Famicom disk system have, but they're just like not soldered together. And there's a
Hmm.
way to like solder them together so that you can play games. Like the Famicom disk system had like just meteor soundtracks. The one that's the most noticeable is the Castlevania 3.
Hmm.
If you play Castlevania 3, the Famicom disk system version of the game, it's just like, oh my god, this sound is totally different. It sounds so much better. So there's stuff like that too that also will improve your sound that we wouldn't have without folks on the internet. What is this secret amount of camera centering you're talking about here?
So this is something a while back. It improves a bit the gameplay. So when you're playing like Secret of Mana, like sometimes your camera gets stuck in certain locations. So
Hmm.
there's a tweak where like the camera doesn't get stuck. If that's like the best way that I could kind of like describe it. So
Yeah,
it's like you're kind of moving up, but then it kind of like it centers it. That's really
yeah,
what the best
yeah,
terminology is for.
yeah. That's
So
really cool. And I know that Secret of Mana. I love that game, but
mhm.
like playing it in 2023 or 2024, it does have it's a fair amount of jank to it. It doesn't always feel like you're hitting people. The camera kind of gets a little messy, so that's kind of cool that people have gone in there and like fixed that problem because
Mhm.
Square's not going to do it, so might as well have the fans do it. So you got any other game improvements you want to talk about?
Yeah, so the other one that I had on my list was actually Game Boy colorization.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. One came out recently, like Dr. Mario. You we played on the regular Game Boy before, and the color palette itself, but they've added color to it. So you can see the pills of like yellow, blue, red, like
Yeah.
certain colors, and it just adds to the experience.
Okay.
And there's been quite a few other like Game Boy, like the Super Mario Land series
Yeah.
has had colorizations at one point in time, and there's quite a few others. So that's really been an improvement.
Recently, I did something on PlayStation. I took Final Fantasy Tactics, which is one of my favorite games,
Mhm.
and I went to a website called Final Fantasy Hacktix, which which is, just like right on the nose. And I actually got a hacked version of Final Fantasy Tactics that you can patch the original game to essentially play like the PSP version of the game. So it redoes all of the dialogue. It adds the FMV movies that you got on the PlayStation Portable, the PSP, and
Mhm.
it changes the translation so it makes more sense. It gives you different job classes. It does all that, but you're still playing it on a PlayStation on the original Final Fantasy Tactics kind of file, and that's just a huge improvement. That's a big thing. That takes, honestly, man, it took me like 2 minutes to do the thing. Like the patch was super easy. They give you instructions on the website, and you just
Mhm.
patch it. You could play the best version of that game possible. So it's crazy, but I love that we're seeing all of this stuff and all of these special things. Now, can someone get started with these types of things?
So, how someone can get started? Obviously, first, we talked about a lot research.
Hmm.
The reason why research is really like that first step is, all right, do you have like the proper hardware for it? Obviously, the time.
Yeah.
There may be some extra steps that are involved in it. And then, you could really, the other reason why research is important is, we talked about a little snippet here, but there's even more that you can go down to. So it's really like, what do you want of like your gameplay experience?
Okay.
But just as an example from like, we're going to just focus on the Wii since we talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
So for anything for the MSU1 patches, with those sound patches, those are compatible with the Wii. So you
Okay.
obviously need a Wii. Then you also do need like soft modding to be able to do that, like an SD card. I have a 256 gigabyte one, which actually works, but based on the tutorials, they say at least like a 32 gigabyte,
Okay.
just because of storage space that you need for all the different files. And there have been multiple different methods for soft modding a Wii throughout the years. When I originally started doing it, which was Smash Stack, where the level editor was the one that would be kind of the exploit to go in through.
Hmm.
But now they actually have Letter Bomb, which actually goes through the Wii's mailing system.
Oh, cool.
So you could be able to soft mod it that way.
And then also, I know one of the popular ones with the Wii is Project M, right?
Yep, that's
Project
correct.
M, which is essentially Smash Brawl, but it functions more like Melee.
Yeah, they did gameplay, tweaks to it where, there's no more tripping. The
Yeah.
gameplay and a lot of those techniques that were in Melee were brought over into Brawl.
All right. That's cool because the Melee fan base is very, very devoted to Smash Melee. So that's really cool. So to do that, you go in through the mail and the Wii mail, and you kind of soft mod it from there.
Yeah, so there's like certain applications and programs, again, with like the research that you find and, certain websites to be able to connect to that would be able
Hmm.
to send to your Wii. Then it's like a letter bomb. It literally looks like a bomb when you click on it, then it explodes, and then you're kind of introduced into like the Wii soft modding section. And as long as like you follow a step by step guide, which there are steps to it, as long as you follow it from like from somebody who I watch is like Blaine Locklear.
Okay.
He's somebody who actually goes through a lot of different steps, and when I follow him, like you should actually not brick your Wii.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like for the Wii or for the PlayStation 3 or for other systems and consoles. So that's really where you get started of just researching. Take your time with it. If you get frustrated, there's other people that are there to help within the community.
Yeah. And definitely stay tuned to any message boards or subreddits or Discord channels that do this type of stuff, because those folks are always kind of instrumental in making sure all this stuff runs well. You might have a Wii that's sitting in a closet. You're like, man, I love this thing. What can I do with it? Well, the internet is your oyster. So just go out there, get your Googles, and see what you can find out there. But do your research, and yeah, maybe have some fun with it. Maybe play some DJ Hero or mod some sound. But George, I think this stuff is really important. Like we said before, it's not just for, hey, I want to play this stuff. It's for preservation. It's for keeping the community alive. And a part of what we do at Long Island Retro Gaming is preservation, and making sure that old consoles are more accessible to future generations and to the modern kind of context of things. And I think this all is just a really important part of what makes what we do unique and different compared to, any other event.
Yeah, I do agree, Mike. And just going to bring it back to DJ Hero 2, something I
Yeah.
forgot to mention to the preservation point. The reason why this was, with DJ Hero 2, there's certain alpha tracks, that were actually done through the alpha builds of the
Hmm.
game that were never released commercially. So because of the community and because of the actual modding of these games, people were able to play certain track mashups that weren't released, certain concepts that were just in their earlier phases, and you can actually see of like the thought process of how the developers were working on the game.
That's
So
awesome.
even though, like, yes, there have been, custom tracks have been added to DJ Hero specifically, there's also preservation of alpha tracks that were never released. Like one of the mashups that I like is actually between Amy Winehouse versus Tupac and Snoop Dogg.
Oh, that's really cool. That's
So
really cool.
that's something that was only like in the alpha testing. It was never released, but you never know what could have happened if it was released. So that's why it's very, very important that, yeah, kind of modding and like hacking and soft modding, there is kind of like a gray area with it, but there are people in the community who do it for the preservation
Oh,
aspect.
of course, of course. And mashups, as someone who knows the music industry fairly well, mashups are actually like the hardest thing to get approval for,
Hmm.
because like you can cover a song, you can do a parody, and that's all kind of covered. Mashups are kind of like, oh, you're changing the fundamental part of the song. So I understand why that's it's so special when you can get something like that or actually have access to it. It's not like you're making profit off of it, right? You're just sitting there and you're playing it on the Wii. And I actually really want to hear this Amy Winehouse Snoop Dogg mashup because that sounds amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
What song is it?
Yeah,
With
so it's actually Tupac featuring Snoop Dogg. It's Two of America's Most Wanted.
Okay,
And but it's versus Amy Winehouse, I'm no good.
that's
So,
fantastic.
so how the song goes, if you've never been like a custom DJ hero with how the mashup system works, because usually they have like a track that's the main track that's playing in the background, but then lyrics or other implements
Hmm.
added.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Amy Winehouse's song of I'm no good is the bass song, but then you have Tupac and Snoop Dogg's lyrics overlaid it, and then
So they're almost like rapping over her song.
correct. And then sometimes you do hear like Amy Winehouse maybe interject a bit and then
Yeah,
kind of add her piece to it. So,
that's cool. That's special though, right? Because like unfortunately, two of those people are no longer with us, so
mhm.
we would never be able to see that happen in real life. So the fact that it exists in this time capsule on DJ Hero is really special. But George, man, this is a really cool conversation. I think it's a really important conversation to have, and I thank you for bringing this to me. Like this was all your idea. You messaged me about it, and I was like, "This is a home run." So, George, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you talking about this. I think this is something that does differentiate what we do and make Long Island Retro Gaming Expo just even that much more interesting. I know you can't tell me specifics, but can people expect anything that we talked about today to show up at the expo in August of 2024?
So nothing is off the table. That's what I'm going to say. So right now, kind of with the expo, we are in the planning phases of
Hmm.
figuring out
Hmm.
how things are laid out, what we want to put out. So everything that we mentioned today, may not be on display, but there's the more that we grow into it, and the more that we actually do research, and the more we have these cool ideas. Not again, like I said, nothing's off the table, and anything's up for consideration. So, as you mentioned before, John Aguilera, who runs an amazing import section, upstairs on the second floor, usually, uh, there's certain ideas that he has that are not even discussed here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you never know, or he may even know knowledge of like more than I know and
yeah,
anybody else. So,
yeah.
and that's what I like again about the expos, that we feed off of each other
Of course,
with
it's
these
it's
things.
very much a team project, so that's a beautiful thing. But George, thank you, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Let the people know where we can find you out there on the internet.
So go onto liretro.com
Hmm.
for more about the expo.
Hmm.
With me, I don't, have like a Twitter or anything. So, but if you come to me during the expo, I'll be at the racing section, talk, chit chat. kind of just enjoy gaming together.
See, you heard that here, folks. You got to come to the expo. All right. If you want to talk to George about any of this stuff, and if you want to talk to him about racing, you got to come to the expo. If you don't come to the expo, you're not going to get to experience this. So you got to be sure to be there. It's August 9th through 11th, 2024 at the Cradle of Aviation Museum on Long Island. It is a fantastic time. It is the best weekend, in my opinion, of the year. And George, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it, and hope you all enjoyed the listen.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike, and hope to see you at Long Island Retro Game Expo. And
yes,
have a great day.
Yeah, enjoy, everyone. Be sure to get to the expo. You can find us on the internet at LI Retro. You can hashtag LI Retro, or you can find us at Long Island Retro Gaming. Be sure to check that out. Get your tickets now. Tickets are on sale. Be sure to get them because you have, by the time we're recording this and by the time this actually hits the airwaves, you're going to have less than 6 months until Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. So we will see you there. George, thanks again, and we will see you real soon.